Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's On the Sofa. Got the privilege of having Nick Hammond on with us tonight, so he'll be on a moment with Vic. Just to let you know, a bit different tonight. When Vic has finished his interview with Nick, we are going to stay on for an extra half an hour, 45 minutes, just to do a Monday night panel from Saturday. It's a bit of a frustration needs to be let out, I think, so we're going to stay on and do that. I haven't got anything else other than, don't forget, it's Friday this week for the game. We have got our senior mascots, so please look out for them as they walk on the pitch with the players on Friday and give them a bit of support. And let's bring Vic on. Hi, Vic.
Hi, Chris. I hope you are well, and I hope you get over your jet lag from Saturday at Hartlepool, because it'll take a couple of days, won't it?
Yes, it certainly will. Yes, it was a long old evening coming home, wasn't it? It seemed like twice as long as getting up there. But
just to say, we won't be encroaching on the Fool's Rush in time at 9 o'clock, obviously. Just to let you know,
we won't be. No,
we won't do that. So they'll be on at 9 o'clock. So you'll get a break before you can go and watch them.
And have a cup of tea before they come on.
Indeed. I've got some SAS travel news for you. On sale tomorrow evening from 7, Tranmere and Wimbledon. So Tranmere, of course, is Easter Monday. Wimbledon in a couple of weeks' time. So those will be on sale by phone only tomorrow, and you can find out the details on their profile, and indeed it's on our website too, the Supporters Club website, the phone number for SAS Travel. So those are the tickets on sale tomorrow. If you want to go to Tranmere or Wimbledon, those are the ones on sale from 7 o'clock tomorrow night.
Brilliant. Okay, so let's bring Mr. Hammond on. Good evening, Nick.
Good evening, all. How are we?
We're all very good,
well.
You.
Yes,
lovely
indeed.
to see you.
And lovely to see you too. It's been a while.
It
has.
A long time.
I'm going to leave you in Vic's capable hands. As always, if there's any questions, leave them in the comments. We'll get through as many as we can. Any that we don't get through, we'll of course send them on to Nick, so he can see the love that we have for him at Swindon. So, okay, I'll speak to you later.
Well, it's a great pleasure to talk to you again. I mean, it's been a long, long time since we've seen each other, but you haven't changed. That's what amazed me. You just look the same. It's incredible, really.
Well, I'm very pleased with the compliment. I mean, I've been in football all my life now, and it can get quite stressful at times. So the fact that you said I haven't changed then is a compliment I'm happy to take, sir.
Well, that's good to know. And also, I mentioned to you before, Rhys Evans had a go at me for not having a goalkeeper's jersey on when we interviewed him a couple of weeks ago. So in your honour, there are a couple of goalkeeper's gloves just for you. So
I can see them hanging behind you.
Yeah, and I hope they stay there, not fall down during the course of this evening. I'm also got the blue 442 shirt behind me because it was 13 years ago today that Swindon won 3-0 at Leeds. 13 years ago. Extraordinary, that wonderful 3-0 success. So that blue shirt is there in honour of that. Mr. Hammond, it's a great pleasure to see you. And you were at Swindon, of course, in some of the best years that we've had as a football club. And let's go back right to the beginning. You started as an apprentice at Arsenal, didn't you? That was where it all kicked off for you.
Yeah, I did. I joined Arsenal at the age of 14, having trained at a number of the London clubs. But Arsenal at the time, just putting the JVC gym in behind the clock end at Highbury, which was this new fantastic facility. So rather than just go there in the holidays, which I'd done previously, they started to bring me into the indoor gym. And I had George Wood, the first team goalkeeper at Arsenal at the time, training me on a Thursday night. I mean, it just wouldn't happen in the modern era, but it was fantastic. I loved it. And I signed for Arsenal, and I never had any regrets on that, because Arsenal's been a sort of a constant thread through my career, really, the relationships that I've had there. I signed for Arsenal, never made the first team, unsurprisingly. Although I did go back and play there in the Premier League.
I was going to say, that'll be one of the moments that you'll remember fondly.
Because that was a very, very special day, actually. But no, I left having never played in the first team, and I came to Swindon that summer, having, again, different those days, written a huge amount of letters to a number of clubs. And Lou Macari had some sort of knowledge of me and invited me down, and I ended up signing.
Yeah, that's the one thing you know about Lou Macari, is he did his homework, didn't he? I mean, he was prodigious in that, wasn't he?
Yeah, no, he was absolutely, and I went and saw him, and it was clear he knew some of my background. He'd done some checking, and it was a reasonably quick conversation. I knew Fraser. I think Fraser had arrived from Manchester United 12 months before, so I knew he was at the club. But it was it was a great opportunity for me. I liked the club from the beginning, and so it wasn't a difficult decision to sign Vic.
Steve says Nick was a phenomenal keeper for us. So there's a compliment straight away.
On the odd occasion, Vic.
I mean, we were lucky at that time to have, both you and Fraser. We'll talk about your relationship with Fraser in a little while. But I remember seeing a comment earlier on today where the ball went into the town end. You were in goal that day, hit a little girl in the face, and you turned around to check that she was okay. And the person who sent the message say that was a lovely thing to do. So there you go. A nice memory for a fan to have that day. Yeah. I'm not going to ask you if you remember that because, you did so much in those days. But obviously you had a couple of loan spells, I think, didn't you? You went to Bristol Rovers and Peterborough on loan.
As part of my experience, I actually made my league debut for Bristol Rovers down at Twerton Park, which was an interesting ground to say the least. And I thoroughly enjoyed it down there. There was good players down at Rovers at the time. One of those, Gary Penrice, is still a good friend of mine. He's worked with me over a number of years when in periods at West Bromwich Albion. I brought him to Celtic when I was there as head of recruitment, and we still do some bits and pieces together now that I'm doing a bit more sort of consultancy work. But that was a good a good time. Peterborough I went to on loan just as cover. I went to Aberdeen as cover for Jim Leighton, which was a fantastic experience for me. Absolute gentleman of a goalkeeper, and a great goalkeeper as well. So that was a fantastic learning experience. And I was just keen to go. It's interesting because you look at the young players these days and you talk about a loan with players out at the top clubs. And I was at Arsenal at the time and have to talk to their agent about it and have to decide how that fits. And you think, well, just get out there, get some experience, learn, be in and around a first team dressing room. But the dynamics of football have changed so much over the last 30 years, Vic. It's quite incredible, really. But they were good experiences for me.
Yeah, and I guess you learn about men's football, don't you? Because, you're an apprentice, I guess you're playing youth football, that kind of thing. And then you're suddenly into this world where it's proper men's football, isn't it? Is that a big difference for a keeper?
Huge. Yeah, well, huge for any player. We still... In England now, we probably have the best developmental system in the world. We didn't 20 years ago, but with the academy system and how that's developed and all the criteria that you have to meet, the academy system in England is top draw now, and those players get a great developmental introduction, into senior football, but what they don't get is that transition to first team, and that's still a big problem for us in England. Under 21, under 23 football, they've looked at all the different versions of, but it still doesn't bridge the gap to first team, and therefore a loan experience is really important. You see the big clubs now; they have multi-club ownership. A lot of these other clubs that come under the umbrella of the big club are there really to give their young players an opportunity to go out and loan and gain experiences. And it's something the very big clubs are all looking at now and all doing, because they realise that youth football, what was reserve team football, is no longer good enough for players to make the transition.
Because it's interesting, isn't it? Because those of us who are old enough to remember will remember the football combination, of course. And, you could go and watch Swindon reserves play the likes of Arsenal reserves, and they'd have Pat Jennings in goal, things like that. Players coming back from injury, all that kind of thing. We don't have that anymore, do we?
No, we don't. And that's a huge loss. And, I played at Highbury as a 16, 17-year-old with senior professionals who had played in Arsenal's first team. And we'd play at 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon while the first team were playing away at Liverpool, wherever it may be. And that was great experience. But that just doesn't happen these days. And again, it's a change. You know, senior players can't play in the reserves. Well, what's that all about? It's, you know, I just, you know, so many things I don't understand. It don't make sense to me in the modern game. But on the other side of the coin, it has come so far. The methods and the expertise that goes around the sort of the performance is on a different level to where it was in my day, for sure.
Yeah, sports science has come on a million miles, hasn't it, since the 80s. Nicky hasn't changed a bit. He looks the same now as in the 80s. Fantastic. That's from Peter. I know we're going to talk about this a little later, but I'm just going to give you this question. It's been a long 23 years since Swindon last played in the second tier. What does Nicky think of Swindon's decline down the leagues and the obvious lack of ambition and investment in the playing side of things in the last few years? I know you've got a lot of thoughts on that, which we'll get to a little later. So we'll part that one and get back to it. So when Lou first came in for you and you first came down to Swindon, did you have any knowledge of Swindon and how they'd done? Because they'd gone up from the 4th division to the 3rd, obviously. I think that's where they were when you came, wasn't it? So what knowledge did you have of Swindon at the time?
Yeah, a little bit. I'd gone to see, I think the season before they'd been in the playoffs, and I'd actually gone to see one of the games. I think it was at Selhurst Park. So I'd done a little bit of background because that's just me by my nature, and it felt to me to be a good opportunity, a good fit. The geography was good. You know, it was far enough away from home that I had to find my own way. I had to grow up a bit, but it was at the same time close enough that my family could get down and see me, and I could get home. Not that we got a lot of time to get home under Lou's stewardship, I have to say, but. So no, I knew a little bit about the club, not really the town, but I settled in the town very quickly. I moved into the house on Shrivenham Road, which was sort of Club Digs at the time, and I had a period in there with a few of the lads. I was the oldest and probably the most sensible, bearing in mind you had sort of Fitzroy and Nicky Summerby, and so it didn't take a lot to be the most sensible, but. So I was there for a period of time, and then I moved up to Stratton, and I lived with my good friend, God bless him, Alan McLaughlin, and Neil Thompson, and that was great times. You know, good guys, really good guys. Alan was struggling to make an impression at the time when we first became friends. You know, he was probably slightly ahead of me, but not by far. And then, of course, he went on to have a magnificent career, and you know, sad loss that's been for us. Absolutely.
You mentioned loans earlier. Of course, he went off to Torquay and had a good loan spell there, didn't he? And I think that really helped his career, didn't it? Because when he came back under Aussie, he blossomed, didn't he?
Yes, incredible. He did. Yeah, he did. And you know, a legendary figure in Irish football in terms of the things he done over there. They still talk about him. So no, he had a great career, and he was a really, really good man, Alan. You know, dour at times. You know, very in a really sort of in a really funny way, like my other mate, Mr. Vivash. You know, really, really great characters, good football people. So yeah, he's sorely missed.
Yeah, very much so. Scorer of that legendary goal at Wembley, of course, in 1990. Or was he? Of course he was.
They were good. On target. So I think the shot was on target. So yeah. You know, I think they'd probably give it to him in the modern game. I don't know.
Yeah, they probably would, but Gary Bennett would be happy for him to claim it.
Sure.
Yeah. What was it like in the atmosphere? Because the club was on the up then. You know, it was an upward spiral. It was up. It seemed, wasn't it, at that time? So, what was the mood within the camp?
Well, when I joined, it was obviously I came and Lou was the manager, and Lou was very clear in terms of what he wanted, what his methods were. We were incredibly fit, incredibly organised, disciplined. You know, he really had the team on a leash, to be honest. And I said to you earlier when we were just chatting quickly, you know, Swindon was such a learning curve for me in terms of things I've done post-playing career, which has been really quite successful for me. But you know, to come and see Lou Macari and the way that he operated, there was a guy that really had a grip of the team at all times. You know, there was never any doubt who was in charge. he was the boss, and you had some strong, experienced professionals in that group. But there was no doubt who was in charge, and everyone was clear on their role, their responsibility, what they had to do. And he brought about great success, which obviously gave him the opportunity to move on. And then of course Ozzy came, and you're really looking at completely the other end of the spectrum in terms of managers and the way they went about their business. And so much of, I think, Ozzy's success in that early period was really down to a lot of the things that Lou had put in place. And then he was able, just the way that he was, the character that he was just able to open it up and expand it and give some license and some freedom that probably the group were looking for. And of course, that team went on to win promotion, but ultimately get put back to where we started.
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a minute. But Lou was legendary for knowing where everybody was, wasn't he? I mean, if you were out on a Saturday night, he'd know that, wouldn't he?
Well, yeah. Listen, I go back to my days in the hostel in Shrivenham Road, and it wasn't a problem for me because I was dating my wife at the time. So the only time I ever got off, I was going home to see her, or she was coming down to see me. So I was in this sort of very, very stable relationship, and thank God I still am. But no, the guys, as I say, Fitz and Nicky Summerby in the hostel, and one or two of the other younger pros who were elsewhere. Yeah, Lou would always know where they were, and I think it was just before mobile. Well, I know it was. It was just before mobile phones sort of came into existence. So they probably got away with it a little bit more than you would do these days, but not a lot. I mean, Lou knew every landlord. That's fair to say.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So, what did you learn from him? Because we'll get onto your battle with Fraser, if I might use that word, in a little while. You had a fabulous relationship with Fraser, I know you did. But what did you learn when you signed for Swindon? Did you get, I don't know, were goalkeeping coaches the same as they are now? Because there are specialist coaches now, obviously. How was it?
No, I mean, we were fortunate in as much as we had Fraser and I had for a period of time John Granville, who lived locally and had been played at Aldershot and been an international for Trinidad and Tobago, and he used to come in and do some work with us. Fabulous guy, but goalkeeping coaching certainly wasn't where it is now, that's for sure. But because Fraser and I had both been at big clubs, Manchester United, Arsenal, we'd had goalkeeping coach. I'd had the sort of legendary Bob Wilson, who was, one of the very best. So I guess there was a little bit of an expectation on our part. So yeah, we were fairly well looked after on the goalkeeping front. And then on the odd occasions that the goalkeeping coach wasn't available, Lou would take Fraser and I, and of course we wouldn't use our hands. We were just running around the goal mouth like lunatics. But yeah, it was an interesting period. But in the round, we were pretty fortunate, really, that we had the opportunity to work with a goalkeeping coach, and it's important because it is such a very, very different position. It's so specialised, and actually, again, you come sort of 30 years, whatever it is, forward. Now you have attacking coaches, you have set play coaches. People who work with the back four. It's as you do in American sport, very specialised. So yeah, goalkeepers were seen that way in the day because we were so different. But it's now fairly normal to have these specialised coaches across your club.
Sure. Right. So then the change between Lou and Ozzy as
Yeah.
a goalkeeper. How did that change? Because it's often perceived that Lou was a long ball player. It was incredibly fit, the team. Ozzy was perceived as more of a footballing manager. Is that fair to say? Or
no, it's absolutely fair to say, Vic. And again, the interesting thing for me, I broke my leg twice over that period. So, I spent a lot of time on the sidelines, we talked about the thread with Arsenal. I would go and do some games at the time for Arsenal, do some scouting. The club would give me permission to do that. I'd go and write reports, watch players, do some match reports. So that was all part of the sort of stuff that I enjoyed and was part of my psyche, and as I was recovering from the injury. But no, clearly there was a very, very big difference. As I say, both ends of the spectrum, really. Lou was fairly direct. He wanted to play in the opposition's final third. He didn't. He wanted to play, low risk, non-risk football. It was really about overpowering, overrunning the opposition. Whereas Ozzy was about playing with the ball, being comfortable on the ball, keeping possession. Working your way through the thirds. So really, both ends of the spectrum, and that's why I think he had that initial success. To me, looking back now from a coaching and the sporting director's perspective, sort of so far down the line, he came in a moment in time where the lads were ready for something different. But there was a level of fitness, a level of discipline, a level of understanding that Ozzy just freed up and gave players some more license. So I think they just enjoyed life a lot more. They enjoyed training more. And of course, that brought confidence, and there were some wins that came, and then the whole thing started to roll. And I'm convinced that's why that success came, because Ozzy was only ever going to play that way. Open, expansive football, because that's the only way he knew. But a lot of the sort of, I guess, the building blocks that Lou had put in stood us in good stead for that early period, no doubt.
It's incredible, isn't it? You've got a Celtic and Manchester United superstar sort of managing Swindon. And then you got somebody coming in. I always remember the first day I interviewed Ozzy Ardiles thinking, I watched you on a grainy black and white TV in the 78 World Cup. You were this magnificent midfield player, and here you are managing Swindon. I mean, how, as a footballer, how was that when these people walk in the dressing room? How is that?
Yeah, I mean, it was fantastic, and he was such a nice guy, and I think you said manager. If I remember rightly, he came as a player manager in the
He did, yeah.
In the very beginning, he didn't play for very long because I think he decided the championship was slightly too frenetic and a little bit rough for him. So, I mean, he soon stepped away from the playing side, but. Yeah, I mean, he's a legendary footballer who's won a World Cup and played at Tottenham Hotspur. So, in the beginning, that person comes and he has that aura, and but a lot of top players have found this. That only lasts so long, and then you get to the sort of the nitty gritty and the muck and the bullets, and you've got to be able to carry it through, and. He done a great job with that team at that time. And as I say, he recognised that there was more to give, and he gave them the ability to go and express themselves, I guess, which give them so much confidence.
We should say, of course, you played in a lot of cup games for Swindon, and we shouldn't forget, it was a great run in the Simod Cup. I don't know if you remember this. You played the likes of Derby, you played the likes of Chelsea, you played the likes of Norwich. People like that. You had one or two really notable cup ties, didn't you?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I remember playing. I think I remember certainly the Norwich games particularly well. But I remember a few of the games of it. If I'm honest, over the years. But if you're going to talk about cup games, obviously the one I remember specifically is the Newcastle game.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, but thank you for bringing it up. Yeah.
So, if you say cup game to me, that's what comes to mind, because obviously the game itself, and then obviously the circumstance that came around it, and everything that followed on. But yes, I mean, I played a lot of cup games, League Cup games, I think Anglo-Italian Cup games. Yeah. I remember playing over in Venice once, which was a great memory for me. It was a fantastic trip. So yeah, played some cup games.
you want to talk about that Newcastle game then? Because those of us who were
Depends
out.
what you want to ask, Vic. I don't want to have to sort of phone my solicitor or.
No. I mean, what are your memories of it? Because let's be honest, I watched a bit of it this afternoon, and the pitch was disastrous. Let's be honest. Paul Gascoigne was one of these players. I remember seeing Trevor Francis when he was 16, thinking, "Boy, he can play." And the same with Gascoigne. It is kind of incredible, really. But what are your memories of it that we won't get into trouble over? Let's put it like that.
The memories of it were this. I think we'd had a run, hadn't we? And so confidence was high. And of course, then we were drawn away to Newcastle. I remember it because when we went, we had a meal out in Newcastle the night before, which was unusual. We went and had an Italian restaurant, and I think it was someone that Lou knew. And so he cordoned off the restaurant, and we had a great meal, and we were very much looking forward to the game. And the truth is, we got taken apart by Paul Gascoigne on the day. Is the simple truth. It was sort of the game that really announced him, because I think there was a little bit of focus around the game because it was our run, and it was, forgive me, I can't remember what round of the FA Cup. But it was sort of the game that really launched Gascoigne into sort of the public's vision. And I just remember Chris Kamara just spending like 90 minutes trying to kick him, and you just couldn't get near him. He was just majestic, and it was a good Newcastle side, and we got well beaten. Is the truth, and so it was a big disappointment, really, because there was, I think we went up 2 days before, if I remember rightly. So we prepared correctly. It was a big game, and really we didn't lay a glove on them. Is my my best memory of the game.
They had the Brazilian superstar, of course, Murandinho as well, didn't they, playing for them? And
yeah,
I mean, I just remember being on the special train that went up and broke down about 6 times, and we arrived about 20 minutes after the start of the game. It was It wasn't a great day. Let's put it like that. No. So let's go to 1990 then. And a wonderful day at Wembley. We've mentioned Alan McLaughlin's goal earlier on. And then the events of 10 days later, which we all remember very vividly. What were your memories of that day when we found out the town were to be demoted 2 divisions originally?
Well, as I said to you earlier, Vic, my memory, I've had so many football experiences, fortunately over my life. My memory of the time at Swindon, it's sort of up and down, really. But I do remember that day very, very vividly, because I was coaching, as I quite often was, and I think it was over at Dorking, and I was coaching some of the young goalkeepers that were in what would now be the academy. And I remember someone coming over to me, don't ask me who, and they told me it had just sort of been announced on the radio, and it was sort of numbness, really. And we finished, and I went home, and I think that's the best way to describe it. You just sort of couldn't really understand it. You couldn't really believe it. As a player, and I was on the periphery of the squad, one, because Fraser was the goalkeeper, and 2, because the injury situation. But I was very much in the squad. I was sort of, even though I was quite young, I had good relationships with the senior professionals. It was a really tight group that we used to socialise a lot, as did the next team, Glenn's team. So we were really quite tight as a group, and it was absolutely devastating, really. And again, so far down the line, you look back and you think, well, did the punishment fit the crime? From a purely footballing financial perspective, I guess I haven't got enough of the detail, but when I see what's gone on in football over this last period of time, it does seem to me now, looking back, to have been extremely, extremely harsh.
Yeah, I'll never forget being at Villa Park that day and standing behind the league secretary as he read it out, and it was quite a blow. And of course, 10 days later, reinstated on appeal to the 2nd division. And as you said before, you had to start again away, didn't you? You're back to where you were, and there must have been a big hangover to that.
Yeah, of course. Of course, there's the disappointment. I mean, a playoff season is always difficult, and maybe talk about that more when we talk about the 93 team, because you finish that much later. So, your summer's shorter. There's less time to prepare in every aspect within the club. Faced that numerous times over the years now, and of course you've got this huge disappointment. So yeah, it was going to be a very, very difficult season. The following season, I think quite understandably.
So Ozzy eventually goes off to Newcastle, and then one Glenn Hoddle comes in. Goodness, they keep coming, don't they? Extraordinary.
Yeah, we went sublime to the ridiculous, really. I mean, it was like, incredible.
Yeah. So Glenn Hoddle comes in, this incredible footballer. His first real, Steve says it still hurts so much even now, what happened in 1990, and of course it does. This incredible footballer, he'd been at Monaco, I think under Arsene Wenger. He comes across his first taste of management, and he was insistent on playing with the sweeper role, wasn't he? All the way through the club, he completely changed the style of football.
Yeah, and interesting again, when I look back, he came in and he played the sweeper role. He wasn't the first coach to play with let's call it a back three or a back five. He wasn't the first coach to ever have done that in the UK. But again, when I think about it now, he was the first coach to play that system properly, who actually understood that system. Generally in those days when people played with a back five, it was really just putting an extra central defender in the middle of the goal to try and stop the opposition from scoring. That's what it was. It was a defensive tactic. In Glenn Hoddle's team, playing with a back three was an offensive tactic, very, very clearly. And he was the first person to really bring that system and understand that system and have a team playing that system in the right way, which is why really that team was so successful. And of course, he was playing in that system, which was a help.
Yeah, I mean, people talk about long ball, don't they? But his long balls were 65-yard passes into the forwards, weren't they? They were kind of, incredible, really.
Well, they were, and of course, don't forget, you also had Ross McLaren in that team who could pass the ball.
Yeah,
I mean, he couldn't move very well, Ross, but he could pass. And again, the way the system developed, where Glenn would step in, and what Ross was, other than a fantastic passer of the ball, he was a bright footballer. He understood the game. So when Glenn would go wandering as he did, then Ross would just instinctively fill those holes and give cover. And so it was a fascinating time. Obviously, I wasn't watching all the time. I played a fair bit under Glenn. So I wasn't always watching. Quite often I was giving the ball to him, rolling it to him on the edge of our box, because he'd get very upset if you didn't give him the ball. And of course, he was the manager. So generally you did. But in other instances, you'd have been a little bit more concerned. But this guy, even at the back end of his career, with a career that people thought was over because of the injury, he was a phenomenal footballer.
Yeah, I was going to give the ball to somebody. Might as well give it to Glenn Hoddle, mightn't you? I mean,
Well, no, absolutely. I mean, I'd been at Arsenal as a young player. I'd played against some good players in my career, and but he was on another level, to be honest. As I say, even at that stage of his career where he was well past his prime.
I mean, that team eventually goes on then and gets the actual promotion in that incredible final against Leicester at Wembley. Let's talk about your relationship with Fraser, because it was perceived at the time that there was this competition between you and Fraser for the number one position. Glenn preferred you, but you and Fraser always got on really well, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, in my mind, there was a competition. I think for the most part, there wasn't really, if I'm honest, Vic. Fraser was a top draw goalkeeper. I mean, in my opinion, he should have been in and around the England squad at that time. I thought it at the time. He really was high level. So, I was in truth, I was the deputy who would come in once in a while in a cup game and give him a rest, and because they needed to keep me, sort of some degree of match sharpness. And I was the guy that would get a run of games every so often if Fraser had a slight dip, which was very unusual. He was a goalkeeper that made very, very few mistakes, which is, I guess, the essence of a top goalkeeper. So, yeah, I was fighting to be the number one, but in reality, certainly under Lou, certainly under Ozzy, not so much under Glenn, because Glenn thought I brought certain attributes to the team, but in the end, really under Glenn, I was the number two. But the reason Fraser and I got on so well, not the only reason, but I was always very supportive of him. I think that's probably why I stayed at Swindon so long. I was there 8 years, and we had a very, very good relationship, and I recognised how good he was. The one thing that surprises me that he never went is the truth. He should have gone to Premier League at a much earlier stage. But so he was a phenomenal goalkeeper. We roomed together. We were good mates. We'd spend time together. When the team went away, we'd go and have a drink on our own. We were goalkeepers. We were a bit different. We were aside from the rest of the group. So, no, we had a great relationship. And, I haven't seen him for a little while. I saw him at the reunion dinner for the anniversary of the promotion. And we had a great chat, as we always do. But on the odd occasion I come down, I think he still does the lounges once in a while, if at County Ground. So, but no, he's a great guy.
Interesting, isn't it? But that 92-93 team, as you mentioned, we got promotion to the Premier League. This debate is often sort of had, would the 1990 team have stayed in the First Division, whereby, of course, 92-93 eventually led to 93-94, which was a bit of a disaster, really, in a way. But do you think the 1990 team would have established itself in the First Division? Wouldn't have challenged at the top, but would it have established itself?
The honest answer to that, Vic, is I don't know. I think it would, again, having been through it as a sporting director at Reading, when you first go up into the Premier League, it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. When we did it with Swindon, when we actually went, people don't really know who Swindon Town are. So all of a sudden you take out a lot of those foreign players that obviously they want to come to London, they want to come to a team with a big name. Swindon was a small town, it's a provincial town, it's not known outside of the UK, and then of course you've got all those other issues around salaries and wage bills, which have become so much more difficult over the last number of years. Would Aussie's team have stayed up? I genuinely don't know. I thought the team that went up with Glenn, because of the circumstance, because of the way that it went up, because of everything that happened subsequently, I thought we had no chance of staying up, if I'm honest. And again, maybe that's a little bit of me as I am now looking back. I probably didn't think that at the time, but when I reflect on it now, it was an impossible task.
And of course, you lost Glenn Hoddle, you lost Colin Calderwood, didn't you, out of that team, which two very big and influential players.
Well, yeah. So you've got all those issues that I've just talked about. You lose a manager who is the driving force for the team on the pitch and off the pitch. You lose Colin, who's like a rock and a leader in your group. The club was in a terrible situation in as much as, if I remember rightly, vast majority of the players that were in the team that got promoted were also out of contract. There were a lot of contracts that needed to be sorted in a very short space of time. Because again, you're in a playoff final, so you're not making these decisions in April when you know that you're 10 points clear at the top of the championship. You're having to deal with these things beginning of June. You're back in 4 or 5 weeks. So I think the club got itself in a real pickle, to be honest, and it sort of unravelled from the beginning. The contracts that were given at the time were a millstone, to be honest, for the club going forward. Glenn left, Colin left. It was a hugely difficult job for John. And of course, then you've got to try and get one or two players in the building and integrate them. And it was very, very difficult.
Benefit of hindsight is a wonderful thing, but I mean, I've often had this theory that the club has taken years and years to get over that Premier League season. It's fabulous to have been there, but goodness me, if it was a good thing, I don't know. What would you think?
No, without a shadow, I agree 100% with you. I think the club, I don't think the club's ever truly recovered from that period, from that demotion, the contracts that were there, the situation with John, and I think it was just a very, very difficult time. You certainly didn't have the parachute payments in place that you do now at those sorts of levels that give you that safety net. None of that was there. So, and they say winning becomes a habit, but the same can be said of losing as well. And John just couldn't turn the ship round. It was going in a certain direction, and the club just didn't have the ability to put the brakes on. So, I think there has been a massive long-term fallout from that. However, there comes a point where you should have reached a low ebb, and then you build properly, you build correctly in the right way with the right people. And, so is Swindon Town a Premier League club? That may be a difficult argument to certainly to be an established Premier League club, but is it a club that should be in a better position in all ways than it is now? Absolutely, it's a fantastic club. It's a great town. So I think there's still huge potential. I do actually in the club. I think there's huge potential in the club, and can it be a sustainable Championship club? Pushing, stretching to maybe make the Premier League through the playoffs. That type, absolutely it can.
Yeah, we'll talk about money in a minute, because I know you're the other side of the fence now, so you see the money side of it. Mark says one of the best games I ever saw was Birmingham City 6-4 on a bank holiday weekend. Glenn Hoddle came on. We changed where he played. What a player. Incredible. Does Nick think it's possible to play your way out of League Two like we did in what is now the Championship? There are all sorts of questions about how we go about putting a team together, which you're the sort of person exactly to ask. So we'll get onto that in a minute and everything like that. But I wanted to talk about Arsenal to you, because going back to Highbury to play in the Premier League for Swindon at Highbury, that must have been a very special day. Yeah,
it was for me, Vic. We didn't sort of touch on this at all, but it really was, because I'd grown up at Arsenal. I had an affinity with the people there. As I say, when I'd had my injuries, they were on the phone to me straight away. Can we help? Would you like to? And I did some scouting work for them with the consent of the club. So it's a very special club to me. It's a great club. It was an institution, still is. And obviously we went back there on that day, and I was in the team at that point in time and playing. And Alan Smith's very unusual for me to remember any detail around the game, but Alan Smith scored very early, if I remember rightly. And then of course we stayed in the game. And we nicked an equaliser. Don't know what minute it was, but it was certainly well into the game. And it was just a fabulous day. And it was that sort of day where you just wanted to just stay that little bit longer on the pitch and just soak it in a wee bit, because, we didn't have many great days in that Premier League season. And I remember coming up the old tunnel at Highbury, and George Graham was at the top of the tunnel, and he was the manager that released me from Arsenal. and he'd made a point of waiting there to just shake my hand and say, well played. And that meant a lot to me. And it showed a lot of class on his side. So that's one of my real best memories, actually, in football, to be honest, in all the things I've done. So
yeah, that's a very nice thing for him to do, actually, isn't it?
it was, yeah.
Yeah. Time is against us. I mean, we could spend all night talking to you, Nick. Would you come back at some future date and talk to us again? Because I'd love to do more with you. Eventually, you go off to Plymouth. I don't know how much you want to say about that move, because it wasn't great for you, was it? But that was under Neil Warnock.
I had 6 months. I had 6 months. I tore my thigh at Swindon, like literally 2 weeks before I went. I missed the whole of pre-season. It was a disaster. I wasn't in the team, and I loaned to Reading after a very short spell, and I had a very good loan spell at Reading, and subsequently they bought me.
Yeah, 20 years you were at Reading. Now let's, if we can, because eventually you have to retire because of a recurring back injury, but let's move to the other side of the fence, because you get into being the youth academy director, and then that moves you into the first ever club's director of football side of things. Now, this is where you get involved with the business of football. How was that change for you?
Well, it was an unbelievable change. I'd gone to Reading as a player, as you say. I'd had the injury. Alan Pardew had come back as temporary first team coach, and he and I had known each other because I'd played some reserve team football with Alan. And he literally phoned me and said, "Can you come and help me? I'm coming back in. I need to know where the group are at," because we used to talk football all the time. And I said, "Yep, no problem." Anyway, the caretaker manager became the permanent manager. I was effectively, almost an assistant manager type goalkeeping coach. And then the academy manager left, and Alan and I talked about it, and because of my love of development of young players, so we talked about running the football side of the club. And so I agreed I'd do the academy, but whenever I was always with the first team as well. So whenever there was a board meeting, I would put the board meeting notes together for Alan. We'd discuss the board meeting. He'd go in there shaking his fist and wanting to knock the door down, and I'd be the sort of the calming voice that would get things done with Sir John. Alan subsequently done very well, headhunted by West Ham. Club was concerned that I was going to go as well, hence the offer of becoming a sporting director of football back in 2003. And yeah, it was brand new then, but I'd sort of decided I wanted to make my own way, because what I know is if you're the assistant that goes with a first team manager, then you're going everywhere with that first team manager. You have to be on his coattails unless you're going to step out of it and become a manager yourself. But this opportunity came, and I thought, no, I'm going to take this. And I was there from 2003 to 2016 as a sporting director, and we built a club out. We built a club. As simple as that, really.
So how did that work then? Were you recruiting players, or was the manager coming to you and saying, "I want this player, I want that player"?
Yeah, it's interesting.
For wages, all that kind of stuff.
It's really interesting because at the time, the role of sporting director, it was like, oh, this is a disaster. No one wants a sporting director. He's the guy that undermines the manager. He's, it's a nightmare. And I listen to the experts on Sky Sports now talking about every club. Well, they need a sporting director. They need someone to pull it all together. So the whole thing, as it always does, has changed, 180 degrees. But a true sporting director really takes the vision of the ownership and drives it through the football part of the business. So as a sporting director, I would have a head coach that would report to me. I would have a head of sports science and medical, head of recruitment, head of academy. So all those strands report in, and all those strands should be traveling in the same direction, looking to basically achieve the ambitions of the club. And the ambitions of the club have to be sensible, they have to be realistic. And then, your job really is to articulate that through the whole of the football department. So if you're going to develop young players, you better make sure your academy are developing young players that are good enough to go and train with the first team. And you better make sure that your head coach recognises that, part of your model is to put those players in the team if they're good enough. your sports science and medical guys need to make sure that physically they're fit for purpose and they're available for selection. Actually, it's a pretty straightforward role, though it's all encompassing, and that's how I see a true sporting director. Are you involved with recruitment? Yes. Are you at the sharp end of that? Yes. Is the manager's view and opinion on that important? Yes. Is he making that decision in isolation? No. So, but all clubs are different, and you have to find your own way. And I'm very clear on how a true model should work, but there are variations on a theme, as there should be, which makes every club individual and unique.
Yeah, you might be aware, of course, that Swindon uses, if I might use the phrase, Moneyball system, where they recruit young players with the idea of selling them on, etc., etc., etc. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Moneyball's is a widely used term now, obviously based on the Billy Bean, sort of baseball story of some years ago now. But literally, every club now uses data. It's just to what degree. If you go to the best exponents of it, who would be Brighton and Brentford, their owners own betting companies. They've got hundreds of analysts in the Middle East, in the Far East, crunching the numbers and throwing out data. At Swindon's level, I'm assuming there's a system in place that identifies young talent that's getting into the team, that's doing well statistically, whatever the statistics that are important to Swindon are. So the truth is that everyone uses data now. It's not different. It's just a question of how much your process is driven by the data, and that's really where the discussion is at the moment, because there's certain things that the data can't show you and won't show you, and there are certain players in certain parts, because of their careers and where they're at, they're not really showing up on the data. So it's a huge area of discussion and investment for sure. Is it important? Yes, it is. But it's only part of the process.
Yeah, I was going to say, it goes back to the old days with Lou Macari going to Rochdale Stockport Reserves on a Tuesday afternoon to see how players play in those games, wasn't it? I mean, that's what he used to do, wasn't it? He'd travel the length and the breadth of the country, do his homework on a player, etc., etc. So that's also very important, isn't it?
Hugely important, because when you get video footage, by its nature, the camera follows the ball. So if you want to watch a central defender and your team's attacking, unless you're in the stadium, you can't see how he's communicating with his other players, where he is in relation to the pitch and the ball, what's his attitude like. Well, when you see Sean Taylor put his head in where others won't go, what does that tell you? That tells you you've got a warrior, you've got a winner. These are the things that the data doesn't tell you. So the truth is, it has to be a combination of all those things, and that's why the top clubs now employ so many people and pay so much money to do that.
Wow, what a great bloke Nick is, and so articulate. Would love to get his views on how our club is being run at the moment and the areas for improvement. Reckon we could learn a lot. Could do you back at SM1, says Daz St. Georgie. You're free at the moment. Given your director of football knowledge and background, what do you make of Sandro's data-driven approach to signing? Well, you kind of answered that question. You were at Celtic, you were at West Bromwich Albion, you were at Newcastle when that massive change on Tyneside took place.
Yeah.
I mean, wow, there's a club where fans are disillusioned with it. That's not going anywhere. And then all of a sudden, they're the richest football club in the world. How was that 3 months for you?
Interesting, to say the least. It was, I thoroughly enjoyed it, Vic, actually, because I was employed as a consultant to advise the owners, which was a really interesting process, because I wasn't in the front of the deal or anything that was going on. I was slightly in the background, which is different to what I've been doing for the last 20 years. But I have all the information. So it was a very, very interesting experience. It was taking them into their first window. They'd employed Eddie Howe 3 or 4 weeks previous to myself. Hadn't quite had a bounce. Team were in the bottom 3. in a January transfer window, now being the richest club in the world. I mean, it's not an easy gig. But I have to say, it was fascinating. The most important thing in all of that was that the manager was top class, like very, very clear in terms of what he wanted for the January transfer window, what he needed, what he required, what was the criteria, and he didn't deviate away from that. He was absolutely clear. So if you've got a manager, head coach, who's that clear on things, and bear in mind this is brand new, so you've got to put your trust somewhere, and good place to put it in Eddie Howe. And so I helped with them, and we worked through targets, and we signed 5 players, and it was a very, very good period. Having had no money most of my career, Vic, we spent an inordinate amount of money in a very short space of time, but the manager was top class. And what was really important, and it's important in any club, you had a lot of new people coming together there. You had a new coach, you had 3 new ownership groups, you had a head of recruitment, but everyone came together in that little period and pulled in the same direction. And that was very difficult. I said to the owners at the time, look, this is brand new. You've got no history together. So you're going to have to put a lot of trust in people, and they did. And I'm really delighted that they're going so well. But he's a top manager, Eddie Howe. Top.
3rd in the Premier League, of course, at the moment after that win yesterday. But again, you can have as much money as you want, but it's getting the personalities and the players that work together, isn't it? That's the whole crux of the matter.
Well, if you look at Everton at the moment, and back in the last season, they've spent well over 500 million in the last 4 or 5 years and made their team worse. So, that's just how it is. So why is that? Is it poor recruitment? Is it a lack of plan, lack of vision? Is it poor managers? Is it a combination of all those things? But that's the truth. People you look at where Chelsea are today. Yeah. I don't believe anything I see in the press, but they're talking about 23 million to bring Graham Potter, another however many million to get rid of him. And the plan's changed in however many months. So, yeah, it's
crazy.
Big money and big decisions.
And just finally, because you are involved at the moment, what are you doing at the moment? What is your role right now?
Well, I'm working as a consultant. I have done for the last 2 years. Newcastle was a consultancy. I've done some work, some collaborations with some clubs here and there. I brought a group of American investors who bought into Plymouth Argyle last year. They bought a 20% stake in Plymouth Argyle, and that same group had just bought Hapoel Tel Aviv in Israel. So I'm acting as a bit of a football advisor to them. I went out to Tel Aviv about 10 days ago for a week and had a fantastic week out there. What a brilliant city. But just had a look at the football operation and make some recommendations to them and give some support. And I'm doing various things across football, and I'm enjoying it. 20 years as a sporting director is a long time, and it really is 24/7. Every day, something needs to be dealt with. So I'm sort of ready just to be a little bit more pick and choosy in terms of what I do and when I do it, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
Well, it's been fabulous catching up with you again. It's been a long, long time. So I'm delighted you look so good. And and if you are a Plymouth Argyle fan and watching this, sorry about the 4-0 defeat yesterday at Wembley, but hey, we all know what it's like to lose 4-0 at Wembley. It's not a problem. Nick, I can't tell you how pleased I am to have seen you again. And hopefully we'll catch up again very, very soon. Thank you so much for your time.
It's been a pleasure, Vic. Chris, nice to see you.
And you. Take care of yourself, and I'll be back in touch, no doubt.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Nick.
all the best.
Thanks.
Cheers. Wow, there we go.
Yay.
We could have had him on for another 2 hours, couldn't we? I mean, what an interesting...
We all say that, don't we? I tell you, it's
brilliant.
Part 1 and part 2 of everything.
Yeah, we need...
Right,
I mean, what a career. Right, should we do our panel bit? We got some therapy.
Should we get
to do,
everybody else? Let's get the others on now.
Yeah.
There we go. So let's get Andy on. Get Jamie on.
Evening.
Yep,
Good evening.
Evening all.
Evening. Right.
Okay. Right.
Yep.
I will see you later.
Thank you. Right. Are you ready for some therapy, gentlemen? Because I think we all need some after Saturday. Is it all doom and gloom or not? Andy, where do you sit on this?
No, it's not. It's not all doom and gloom. I think you glass half full time. First 25 minutes on Saturday, there was some really good football played by Swindon. It was neat. It was intricate. Williams, Khan, McKeekran were playing some really nice stuff. And I think, I was going to say, if we'd scored a second goal, I just think back of Rochdale. So there was some real positives, and you saw that this was the first time we'd really seen McKeekran and Khan play together. You couldn't really count the previous week because obviously the issue with Wakeling. I thought, yeah, there was, and then it all went a bit pear-shaped.
Yeah, and not recovered from Saturday. Help me, says Kevin. So this is where the therapy will work, I think. Daz says one word: shocking. Jamie, where were you with this? Because I think actually we'll get a different perspective from Andy and Rob because they were kind of side on. We were behind the goal. So what were your views of Saturday?
I'm not sure it made a lot of difference whether you were side on or before. I think to be fair, 11 o'clock off on the way back from the M5 or whatever it was after a very long trip back, it was pretty much doom and gloom. Yeah. But I think there is an element of you do have to look at it half glass full or whatever you want to call it and say at least maybe we're learning lessons early enough to do something about it for next year. I guess that's the way I'm looking at it, that there's very little washing over or covering things up at the moment, and hopefully if we can learn early enough what the gaps are for next year, maybe we're not going to end up in the mess in the summer of scrabbling around trying not to solve them. But it's damn depressing when you spent 6 hours going backwards and forwards and trying to follow it. But a bit like Andy said, I think we need to remember there were chunks of the game where actually it wasn't that bad. It just proved again that we can't see a game out, and how many times we said it. And I'm sorry, that is experience, and we need to admit it. And I'm actually really pleased that Jody appears to have come out and said that. I think we all were travelling back. Let's be honest about it, and let's not try and fudge it, because if we do fudge it, we're going to be in the same situation next year. Yeah,
it's interesting, Rob, isn't it? Just listening to what Nick Hammond had to say about sporting directors, technical directors, and the work that goes on behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff. The one thing I think we all agreed on Saturday was what Jamie's just touched on. We want to see work done early this summer, don't we? We want to see a team taking shape early this close season.
Oh, absolutely, Vic. We had this conversation, didn't we? Very, very end of last season, and I think just before the managerial shake-up, we were all hoping that we were going to have a season of consolidation more than anything else. A very quiet, close season where we just ticked over with a few players, and then all of a sudden, manager goes, players go, we have to start all over again. That's what we cannot do this time round. It needs we get this little, if you call it a little advantage, we get an advantage now where we know we're going to be in League Two next season. Forget all this talk about playoffs and still people talking about it. It's not going to happen. No. We need to talk about what the realistic hopes and aims are for next season and put in place that blueprint that Nick Hammond was talking about a few minutes ago. Get your players in the right positions at the right time. Don't just rely on data. Look at your Sean Taylors, who's a winner and gets his head involved in the game and stuff like that. That's critical. We are so lacking a leader, so lacking somebody who's going to take the game by the scruff of the neck and drag all of the bodies with them. And that big thing that we need in this division, you've got to have size at centre back. If you haven't got size at centre back, you will struggle. Didn't concede on Saturday to a header, but we know we've done it so often over the course of this season. You have to be able to play your football, but have defenders in positions where they are going to be able to make sure they keep the goal shut at the other end, and we haven't done that enough this year.
Comments coming in, as you would imagine. Lee says, agree, Jamie, some really good football results comes down to experience. We're not mathematically safe yet, says Daz. Be nice to have a full pre-season. A year and a half ago, the fans were told to back the club. The more bums on seats, the more investment on the playing side of things. Averaged 9,500 last season. Apart from Austin, it's been poor recruiting. Andy, this is a recurring theme. The current form was second from bottom. Yeah, that is the depressing statistic about where we are at the minute. The recurring theme is recruitment. Now, interesting, when I was talking to Nicky just now, and when he became director of football at Reading, how much say does the manager have? How much say does the director of football have? How would you like to see that work? Would you like to see the manager say, I want this, you go out and get that? How would you like to see it work?
Well, they've got to work together. You know, there's various rumours. Does this person stay? Does this person go? And everything like that. Let's assume the pair of them are there at the end of the season or going into the new season. All this good stuff about data and Moneyball and that will identify individuals. What we now need is someone to say, yes, individuals are great, but we need the places fitted by team people. We need the glue. So as we've seen so many times this season, individually those players, there's some good footballers there, but we miss, like Rob said, a key person. We miss a good old Anthony Grant in midfield. So what we really need to be doing, bring the individuals in, but then collaborate and say, right, I need this, I need this, I need this. You go out and get them, but we need a team. And that has been the problem. And I think probably since we lost the big experienced players in the likes of McDonald and Gladwin and to a lesser extent Reid. Saturday, it cried out for someone with experience to be able to put the on the ball, slow it down. Someone like a Darren Prattley or something like that would have done the sort of the dark arts and slowed it down, got in the referee and everything like that and saw the game out. And I say that wasn't the first time. There was the Sutton situation. There was the Rochdale situation. I was quite disappointed. If I was being critical, I was being quite disappointed there. Even though we had sort of fairly young inexperience, there was an insufficient attempt to change it. All right, he brought Addy early on and that, but we should have tried to close it down even more than we did. There was players on that field that were very, very tired. Tyrese Shade was very tired. There wasn't enough, to me, emphasis on let's close this game down. And they then came through us, and it was only a matter of time that we were going to score, wasn't it?
Manager should have 100% final say, as he's the only one at the club with actual football knowledge. No one else been in the team in a changing room. Whole football setup is amateur. You won't get out of physical league with just kids. What a bad day. And then to be in the services to see the players coach, see our coach and drive straight out again. Apparently that did happen, Jamie. I think you were there, weren't you? And that did actually happen. So if somebody wants to confirm or deny that, that's great. But we'd like to know that, please. Still tactics wrong. Need 4-4-2, 3-5-2, not 4-3-3. Need two sitting, holding midfielders. Let's get realistic. Next season will be like Groundhog Day. We'll keep the manager, have a complete new team, and realise things are not working out, and you'll be gone by Christmas with, again, the season in a mess. I mean, the one thing that we, as Rob said, Jamie, the one thing we desperately need is a proper pre-season with a proper squad sorted, so they've got time to work on everything. I mean, to me, that's a given, isn't it?
Well, let's face it. I think we all said our pre-season started at Harrogate, didn't it, this year?
Yeah.
We didn't have one before that. And that showed at Harrogate that it looked like it was the first time any of them met each other, and they sure as hell weren't fit enough to be in a first league encounter. But that's probably been the case for 2 or 3 years, isn't it? So I think and the key bit is let's get a proper pre-season schedule. We need a squad that's put together early enough to actually be able to go through pre-season together. And that's had a couple of cherries on the top, if you want to call it whatever, in terms of loans or whatever that are nearer the edge. But you can't be putting together half your team with a game or so to go, thinking that you can kind of play the transfer window, if you like. And is that fair on the coach or manager? I mean, I think it was really interesting what Nicky said about there was a really clear direction from Eddie Howe, and what Eddie Howe saw as a vision was what the team was being delivered for him. I don't think the manager has to be totally in control. You can't do everything. I mean, you never be managing the team and coaching and doing everything if you were doing the whole job. But surely it's got to be him that dictates what he needs for his team, and the science, and that is there to help him do it.
Yeah, individuals. So interesting, isn't it? I was saying about Lou, Rob, that he would go off to watch Stockport against Rochdale Reserves on a Tuesday afternoon just to check out how a player performed in a game like that. I mean, personalities are really important, aren't they? The mentality of the footballer, how they fit into a team. And as I said to Nicky, you can have as much money in the world as you want, but if those 11 don't stick together and fit together, that's not good, is it?
No, it's critical, and you've got to have the right men in the right places. That's the key to all of this. It's Jamie talking about putting getting the icing on the cake with the cherries on the top at the very end of the transfer window. That's the way it should work. You should have the base of your squad together and the real key personalities that you'll keep for the whole of the season in place at the start of pre-season. So they give all the rest of the younger players those good attributes, those good thoughts to pass on down through what will be a very long season. And we shouldn't forget that a lot of these players that we're looking at now, and we are being critical, and rightly so, because the performances haven't been good enough to get us where we want to be. They're young kids. They're making their first season in the game. And you can't expect, without top-class coaching and real leaders within your team, for those players to be able to work it 100% every game. It just doesn't work like that. I was talking to Andrew about it from our co-commentary on Saturday when we were actually talking about it. During the game was a wonderful game for a commentator to talk about because it was end to end. There was things happening all the time. It was a brilliant game to watch. But I've got this real problem going on in my head. I'm a Swindon fan. I don't want to see an open game like this. Just kill the game. The game is there to be killed. Just don't take quick free kicks and give the ball away. Just wait a minute. Just hold fire. Not give the momentum to the home team. And that's exactly what we were doing. We were giving them every opportunity to get back in the game. Plenty of chances ourselves. Let's be honest. We could have killed the game 4 or 5 times over. And their keeper did make an absolutely superb save.
Incredible.
In that second half. But irrespective of that, we can manage that game so much better than we did. And it was a real kick in the teeth to concede as we did. All credit to Hartlepool. They kept going, but they had to, didn't they? Their need was far, far greater than ours.
Yeah, it was interesting, though. Once they got that second goal, they did kill the game, didn't they?
They did, exactly.
They took it to the corner. They stuck the ball in the corner and they kept it there and things like that. Ian says, poor recruitment and injuries have cost us. Can't remember the last time Swindon had a full and proper pre-season. We desperately need this and need to hold on to some experience in all areas of the pitch. Need our targets in early, not messing around till late. Let's have a look. Clem is a businessman and will realise that to achieve his season ticket sales, he has to get 2 or 3 exciting signings as soon as the window opens. Failure to do so will result in far less money for the necessary other signings. Overall, I do believe Jody Morris knows what he wants and will get it. Stephen says the big difference between Nick Hammond and Sandro. Nick Hammond's an ex-professional footballer. We need professionals in their trade in important roles at the club. Let's have a look. Loads coming in. We need a defensive coach as a priority. Is that Gunning's role within the coaching setup? If it is, he's not doing a great job, but we do lack quality at centre-back. I'd expect Morris to add more bodies to his coaching setup as a priority. And surely, hello, Andy, surely you have to give Jody the chance to build his own team in the summer. This hasn't happened for the last few seasons. He needs a full pre-season and bringing some experience to work alongside the younger players. I mean, Andy, we could go around in circles and say this loads and loads of times. I mean, we could be miserable as anything. And I think, we were miserable coming back on the bus. We were all miserable. And I was miserable yesterday and we're all fed up with it. But the one thing we want is to be positive about this football club. We want to see it go forward. So what we want is that squad to be built on early, get some old lump at the back who knows how to head the ball away, things like that. Division 4 football isn't won by stylish football all the time, is it?
No, not at all. Not at all. It's a good old-fashioned spine, isn't it? Goalkeeper, central defenders, midfield and forward. It's very simple. And that's what we hope now. As I say, what is it he said? The good news is we've got 8 games left. The bad news is we've got 8 games
left. Yeah.
But like people have been saying, right, okay, we are where we are. We're not going up. Let's treat the next 8 games as part of our pre-season. Jody can have a real good look at see some of these players if they are capable. I mean, he knows in his own mind who he's going to keep and who's going to go. And I hope that they're both working very hard together and then collaboratively, as I said earlier, to be able to bring in those players. And it's absolutely right. We've got to get that right. I mean, clearly, one of the first things we need to do is get a quality goalkeeper that we know is going to be there for the season, being on loan, and then work from there. We have got, with the experience in that, with an experienced number of players. The other players that we've got, there's some real promise there, so that's the positive. There's some real talent in that squad, but it needs to be knitted together with, as I say, some good old heads, some lumps at the front and the back.
It's interesting though, when Charlie Austin went off, and to a certain extent Johnny Williams, that experience went out of the team, didn't it? And the know-how on how to kill a game, that also went out of the game. So, I mean, I know Charlie went off because he had an injury, he got kicked on the foot, didn't he? But it is noticeable when they go off that experience leaves the team, doesn't it?
I don't know many of those two. How many of that 11 that was left on Saturday have had more than a full season, as Rob alluded to? I think maybe Fraser Blake Tracy was the eldest on the field. Was he at 27 or something like that? So that's a very interesting, and that happened before. It works positively. It works at Salford. I think the same thing happened maybe, or game like that. So it's not just necessarily about age, but clearly, if we don't get the experience in pre-season, then we're going to have another season like this one.
Hello, Jojo. Rebuilding summer, lose the deadwood and give JM a chance to recruit. Data has its place, but it's not strong enough on its own, which I think the point is that Nicky Hammond was making earlier on. Plays his part, but there are other things that come into play. Your second Swindon club needs you. Swindon Supermarine are pushing for the playoffs. Town season ticket holders can get in for a £5. And on Saturday, official supporter club members with the production of their card, by the way, can get in for a £5 as well to watch Swindon Supermarine. So that's this coming Saturday. I have a town season ticket. I will not use it again this season. Absolute dross, mid-table, 4th division rubbish. Major overhaul needed. Moneyball not working for Swindon. We do have good young ones for the future, but we need to get out of League Two now, not the future. Unfortunately, Sean, that ain't going to happen this season, is it, Jamie? I think any hopes of getting out of League Two this season were completely and utterly extinguished on Saturday.
I think it was well before Saturday, but I think we're ever the optimist, so you're never going to discount it. But yeah, realistically, I mean, you only got to look at the form table. It doesn't warrant many more positive wins, does it really? But I tend to agree with what Andy's saying. We've got to treat it as, surely now you've got to look at the players that you think are going to stay. And if there's one or two or three that are there that he's not sure about, now's the time to blood them in. The downside of that is, what happens if you lose the next 7 games or 8 games by doing that? You take a bit of a risk if you're the manager, don't you? So I can understand why he might still want to progress with whatever he seems as the best team, but does that help us with next season? But will the fans stand for that from the next few home games if we get beaten or if we don't perform well? It's a tricky one, isn't it? What do you do? Do you try and look at the bigger picture for next season, or do you try and ground some results out for the rest of the season? I don't know.
It's an interesting one because Steve says Orient, Stevenage, and Carlisle all bottom last season. Things can turn around, but the danger is the fans need to believe, or they won't renew those season tickets. That is a problem, Rob, isn't it? Because as Jamie alluded to there, how do you play this? Do you say to people before the games now for the remainder of the season, this is what we're going to do. We're going to look to next season. Do you try and win as many games as you can this season? It's a really tricky one, this.
Well, those 3 teams that were just mentioned there, Leighton Orient, spine of the team were all together last season. Richie Wellens was in early enough to be able to look at it, knew what he wanted, got everybody he needed on board in the close season. Look where they are now. Carlisle, Paul Simpson came in, turned the club around at the back end of last season. Again, they gave him the whole close season, bit of support, not so much money as they had at Leighton Orient, but look what he's turned the team into. Stevenage, total change, brought in Steve Evans. You know my feelings on Steve Evans, and it'll always be the same. But he was given the opportunity to go and get players in really early. You look at their transfer dealings, they got all of their dealings done really, really early in the window, and they benefited from it. There's a continuity point. You can't step away from it. It's the most important thing in football. You might get all these players together at late stage, and they might all gel, but it's more luck than judgment for that to happen. You need to have a real plan in place. And we've lacked that plan. Over several seasons, we've lacked that plan. That's what they must get right this time round. They've got Jody Morris. If they're going to stick by him, give him the support he needs in the summer, let him get his own men in. We'll note a caution, though we haven't mentioned it. We've got players on 2-year contracts here. If Jody Morris doesn't want it or doesn't want them, we've got to try and maneuver them out somewhere along the line. And we all know money is not going to be thrown at this from our owner. He's going to be careful with the way that he spends it. So if he's got to be paying up contracts, that's a lot of budget going out of our money going out of our budget at the start of the season. So we do have to be cautious about this, but the whole thing is all about continuity. Get the right players in, identify the ones you've got that you want to keep, and work extremely hard with the ones that you don't to get them out really, really early so it doesn't end up biting on your backside at the start of the summer.
Sure. Neil says, I'd love to hear from the club on what they planned around player signings, not who, but the approach and clarity on what type they believe they want to make the difference. And doing the same thing won't bring a different result. So they need to be open and transparent with us fans. We are working on that. Trust me. Steve Curtis says, Austin and Williams need to sign now for next season as a message of intent. We need a Gordon Greer type centre-back, an Anthony Grant type defensive midfielder. We need a total rebuild in our midfield. Different types of players, but height and physicality are a must. We need players to get fans off their seats like McCurdy, Isgrove, and different types of centre forwards. I mean, I keep making this point, Andy, and it's like a broken record, but we just lost 40 plus goals from last season, which we never replaced, did we? I mean, Jake Wakelin, of course, in his first season, really. Charlie's come in, he's got 8 goals, but you've lost 40 goals from Payne, Simpson, McCurdy. That's a lot of goals to find, isn't it?
It is. It's, it could be interesting. Come the end of the season, we might not have a player to score 10 goals in the season, which is quite concerning, isn't it? And that's been the problem all season, isn't it? It's not just a recent thing. We remember sort of the horror stories at Gillingham, and that we were just trying to knock the door down, but we still couldn't shoot. So that has been a problem, and I'm sure that's probably very high on Jody's list to sort of have a proven goal scorer. And he's got a proven goal scorer in Charlie Austin. It all depends to see whether he's with us next year. And as long as they leave Charlie in the 18-yard box, he'll put the ball in the back of the net for you, won't he? So yeah, that you're absolutely right. I know you've said it a number of times. To lose the 40 goals, that's the biggest challenge going forward.
Yeah, Charlie did put the ball in the net on Saturday, of course, and very bravely, but there was an offside flag, I think, if I remember rightly. It was a great header. We went up and, there are some intelligent young players at the club with some experience. We could have a good team. Let's keep those younger players with a year under their belt and some experience. We could have the nucleus of a good side. Thanks, Andy. Keep in mind, we've had a couple of quality players apparently join us, i.e. ex-Watford one, yet another that fell through. Right. Let's get positive for the remaining 8 minutes of this, because we've had the depression of the coach journey back, of the long coach journey back. Where are we going, Jamie? I mean, is there a possible Tranmere on Easter Monday? How lovely. I bet the chip shop will be shut as well. That'd be great, wouldn't it? Let's talk about the future then. Do we see this season as a massive learning for the club in what they need to do? Is that how you see it?
I think we have to, but I think it would help if someone at the club admits that as well, because I think the danger is it could get really negative towards the end of the season if there isn't a kind of expectation that we have learned from lessons and we're going to do things differently. Otherwise, it could be quite a long a long close season, because if you imagine going through the first month or so of close season, if nothing happens and there's no communication, I think this is time it needs to be open and honest. The communication needs to be as good as it's ever been at the end of this season and into the close season, because otherwise you're not going to get the renewal rates you want, and then that's going to spiral out of control. But I think let's look at some of the players we have bought in. I think we've all said 2 or 3 players that have come in most recently. Brewitt, I think, is a cracking signing. Can we hold on to him? I think he's made a really difference. We've got a midfield. There's a couple of young prospects in there as well. But it comes back to this spine bit, as Rob said. We need 2 or 3 really, really top quality spine, and then I think there is the potential for those that we've still got around it. I think that the positive for me is we've also got quite a lot of, I don't want to call it deadwood, that's a bit kind of disrespectful, I guess, but there's quite a lot of players that have been on the books this year that we've never seen and we're still paying for, and hopefully they come off at the end of this. So as much as we loved Bowdry when he was at his top notch, we haven't seen him all season, we're still paying for him. There's other players during this year as well that have been missing for large part of it with injuries. Maybe if we can move some of those on and use the budget better, then we should have one of the better budgets. We should have the investment there with the crowds we get. So we shouldn't forget that. Maybe if we were getting 3,000 crowds every week, didn't have a budget, and we were in the same position, I'd be a lot more worried than maybe where we should be.
Yeah. I'd just like to point out, as I said right at the start of this with Nicky, it was 13 years ago today that we beat Leeds 3-0, Rob, at Ellen Road.
What a day that was!
What a day that was! And
in typical Swindon fashion, we then got beat on the Saturday at Colchester, didn't we?
Yes, indeed. But you'd love to be in that position again, wouldn't you? 3-0 at Ellen Road. Gosh. Okay, Steve says positive. All shirts discounted already. Get down the club shop immediately. Brewitt and Clayton too small together. Which one are you going to drop? That's an interesting point. Central defenders you've mentioned already. So positive, Rob. What are your positivity thoughts for next season?
So there are some. We can't shy away from the fact there's many a problem, but there are many good players still here, and it's we're missing the glue that binds them all together. That's the problem, and it's been the problem all season. The experience has come out of the team. You need to get that experience back. Now, I love Tom Clayton. I think he's got a real future in the game. I think he'll be a real top quality centre back. He's had no experience alongside him since McDonald left. As much as we didn't like McDonald, he was probably the one defender who did head the ball and get blocks in. Brewitt has started to do that. Blake Tracy has been a model of consistency all season. It's great we've got him for another year. He will come on with that extra responsibility, I think. I'm more worried about the top end and the middle of the pitch. Kane may turn into a good central midfield player, but he's very raw. I don't really see a lot from the rest of the attacking and midfield lineup now moving forward. I think that's where we'll need to do a lot of business. But the critical bit of business is still that centre-back for me. It's an absolute must. Andy mentioned a goalkeeper. I like the thought that we would get a goalkeeper in for the season who will be our goalkeeper, and he will be ours all season, and he'll be 6'4", and he'll knock people out all over the place. Where's Stephen Bender? Get him back straight away.
And he can catch the cross, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. But there are lots of positives. The problem is that we've said it before, haven't we? We've got our seasons the wrong way round. If this had been last season, with our playoff season this year, nobody'd be complaining about it. It'd have been what we all would have expected. We overachieved last year based on where we started at, and we've massively underachieved this year. So the lessons need to be learned on and off the pitch. And next season, we all need to pull together and try and bring this club forward. Because there's been times this year when we've all got on each other's backs, supporters as well as players. Players haven't done the job. Everybody's been fighting in different directions. This has got to stop. If we want to move forward, we've all got to channel it in the right direction.
To have two keepers like Nicky Hammond and Fraser Digby, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
That wouldn't be about it. The club has taken its eye off the football pitch this season, too busy concentrating on off-the-field matters, ground purchase and debt reducing. Amazed that we've been getting 9,000 plus crowds with what's been happening on the pitch. Lowest league position, 17th, Division 4, 1983-84. Watch this space. Andy, be positive then for the remaining minute or so of this. What are your thoughts?
Right, so one of the problems, the word is continuity. And we went into the end of last season, we were obviously dispirited after losing at Port Vale. But then we obviously had the bombshell of losing a manager. And then it took all that time to replace him. And, we ate up the pre-season. The same sort of thing happened again in the transfer window. So let's hope that we've got a manager that's gone a 2.5-year contract and an assistant manager. We've got a lot of players on 2-year contracts. Now, Rob's absolutely right. Some of the if you've got to move people on, that'll be difficult. But we're not going to get to that situation the day after the end of the season where half the dressing room's gone. So we'll have a core, we'll have a manager in place, assistant manager in place, and the director of football that are hopefully talking to the manager. So we've got a structure in place. It's now hopefully to fill the gaps. We've got a long pre-season and we hit the ground running, as Jamie absolutely rightly said, not in July in Harrogate where we just didn't show. So we are in a very strong position. And that's really what happened with Richie Wellens with Orient. He was there back end and he got everything in place. And then look what's happened to them. So continuity there, as long as nothing major changes with managerial, and they fill those gaps. They get the Gordon Greers in, they get the Benders in, and get the Anthony Grants in, and then you can look forward to August with a lot of positivity. He says.
There you go. That's it, isn't it? Club needs a plan that fans believe in. If you all want to sing from the same song sheet. Worried about our homegrown crop, Minturn, Calmeadow, Parsons. Don't see a future for any of them come June. I think Minturn is the one that stands out there, isn't he, as a future prospect. Need an experienced centre-back, good keeper and some experience in midfield, plus a proven goal scorer should Charlie go. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. We had a bit of a therapy session there. So thank you very much. It wasn't all doom and gloom. We tried to be positive at the end. So we'll see. It's not up to us. It's up to the football club to get it sorted and see where we go come August when that new season starts. There we are, Chris. An hour and a half. Wonderful chat with Nicky Hammond. Some good chat with our good friends here too.
Fantastic. Yeah, Nicky was very good. And I've thanked him for all the help he's given us. So, and thank you guys for coming on so quick notice for that. So thank you, and I hope you now feel a bit better with all that. Bit of frustration out. Thank you everybody for watching. We will be back a week on Monday. Next Monday is obviously bank holiday when we're at Tranmere, so we won't be on. But there is a possibility that we may do another night that week, but we will certainly let everybody know if that is the case. But certainly the following Monday we will be back. Okay, so have a good week. Enjoy the Tranmere, not Tranmere game. When we put it Mansfield first, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
And hope we're a bit better mood after it. So thank you everybody and take care.